For industry news, click through the exhibition showrooms and talk to our exhibitors. If you want some variety in your daily schedule, check out our parallel events, which offer a deep insight into specific PV topics. Want to share your own ideas and inspiration? Connect to fellow participants in our networking lounges and be part of the global PV community. Don't forget to check out the awards shows. The Baccarat Prize winner will be announced during the opening, while the poster and student prize winners will be awarded.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Finally, here we are. We're on our first ever online conference. Everybody's had a very challenging year, I think, and not least us trying to get this program on the ground. We're really very proud of everybody in the whole PV community that we've actually managed to keep the program very much as it was originally intended, which seems many months ago. It almost seems like a different year, but it was at the start of this year we were creating the program for this conference. And despite all the challenges, everybody seems to have managed to complete all their work, and we have pretty much the same program we originally intended. So we'd like to thank you very, very much for your commitment to the science and your commitment to the conference. And of course, you are the most important part of the conference. So the purpose of the conference is to further the science, obviously, and also to try and think of the impact on society that our work will have. We want to share our work, learn other people's work, do networking, meeting old friends and making new ones. Now, we cannot meet physically this year, of course, but I'm hoping that with the platform that we've got in place, we'll be able to meet virtually during the week. So I really strongly encourage everybody to follow the live presentations, the plenary sessions, the oral sessions, and the visual sessions, and also make use of the various networking tools that we have available. We have some chat rooms available throughout the week, which are based on the thematic topic. And you can also contact anybody directly by finding their name on the online tool, and you can send messages to anybody you wish and organize a meeting with them at any time that's convenient. So I would strongly encourage you to get to know the platform, look at all the options that are available, create an agenda for the week, and basically just have a great week. I learned a lot, and we hope you have a great week. So now I'm going to hand you over to the chairs of the first plenary session, which is Professor Portmans and Beth, and I'll hand you over to the first plenary session. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so good morning, everybody worldwide. It's my pleasure to share with Jeff this first plenary session, which is a tradition in the European Conference that it deals about innovation in PV technology. My name is Andreas Bett, and I'm director of Fraunhofer ISE here in Freiburg. And sitting here in Freiburg, it's a real special feeling for a European conference, and I hope worldwide the people join us. From my side, I say good morning, and we will immediately start with the plenary talks, and I remind the speakers to keep the time 15 minutes. And I'd like to introduce the first presentation, which will be given by Andres Hagfeld from EPFL Lausanne. The title is State of the Art of Perovskite Photovoltaics. And Andres, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Bett and Professor Portmans. It's a big pleasure for me to give a talk on state of the art of perovskite solar cells, and see if I change this. Do you see now the talk?
We see it.
Yeah. So, well, hopefully we can start to visit each other as well, not only in cyberspace. So you are most welcome to our campus on EPFL. To summarize state of the art for perovskite solar cells in 15 minutes is indeed a challenge. So excuse me for missing a lot of interesting work. So this is like a Swedish smorgasbord in a way, with the background in our own work. I will say then that there is a lot of things happening on single junction devices, and the direction is to go to the ideal band gap for single junction, which is then to use pure FA lead I3 and try to solve the challenges with making this composition stable. Then there is a lot of work on passivation, which also improves the efficiencies and not the least also on the stability. And on the tandem systems, which I will finish and then more or less hand over to other talks where we will see record levels and so on. So if I start with the classic chart, you can go to the right-hand side of the chart, and you will see then that the certified record is by the Korean CRICT and MIT at 25.2. We have then the tandem device, which is by the Helmholtz Center in Berlin, 29.1. And there is also from the same group the record for tandem on perovskite on CIGS. So that's in terms of efficiency, small devices, of course, but the certified values. What has made this efficiency possible to a lot of extent is the strategy of compositional engineering, where you then work on the A site, the cation, you work on the halides and try to find the optimal composition to get the highest quality possible perovskite formation. And from us, this sort of strategy was very much taking off by what we call the triple cation recipe, which we worked with some years back. And you can see here in the efficiency chart, when we compare the double cation to the triple cation with higher efficiencies and also better reproducibility. And also on the right-hand chart, you can see a little bit on what kind of cations you can think about using, and it has to fit into the tolerance factor, of course. And you see that cesium is a little bit on the smaller size and formamidinium is on the larger size and so on. So this work we have continued a lot with. And another direction we took also some years back was to work on planar structures. This goes back 5 years now, and where we identified tin oxide as our favorite substrate contact for planar perovskite. And this was ALD deposition at the time, 18% efficiency. And of course, now there is a lot of work on both mesoporous, and it's normally TiO2, and also on tin oxide. A combination of these two directions we published 2 years back now. And the important thing here is to say that the goal for us is really to go for pure Fa formamidinium lead I3. We want to avoid the methyl ammonium for stability reason. It's a volatile cation. We want to avoid bromide because that increases the band gap. And here we found a recipe with our compositional engineering and reached efficiencies about 20%. And it really shows, if we look into the cross-section SEM pictures, where we from the left go from the formamidinium, where we have, as you can see, maybe voids and holes in the structure. Then we add 1, 5, 10, 15% cesium to the Fa and get fairly good morphologies, monolithic grains, and so on. If we follow the rubidium, you see that it's not very much a nice morphology. The efficiency is also poor. And our ideal composition became 5% rubidium, 10% cesium, and then 85% formamidinium. And that shows us that we can, with the compositional engineering, go towards formamidinium, avoiding methyl ammonium and bromide at the same time. So just to give you where we are at the moment, this is work accepted in Science, will be published in about a month, where we are really very close, or even I would say pure Fa lead I3 due to compositional engineering and treatments in the process. What we are very happy with here is our voltages. We are at 1.19 volt at best for this band gap of 1.49. The theoretical highest possible is 1.255, so we lose only 65 millivolt, and we think that's a kind of record, I think, in terms of lowest VOC losses. That also corresponds to a very high electroluminescence, which we also think is at record levels of 6.5% at the short circuit current of the device. So this gives us an efficiency of 23.5. So if we extrapolate a little bit and say that with this kind of band gap, we should be possible to have 26 milliamps. It's on the current, we are losing a little bit. A high fill factor of 0.85, that's a big challenge, but in principle possible. We think that it will be very possible to reach 26% and a little bit higher. And we are on the way here. We have also to be published a certified record together with the Korea Institute of Energy Research. It's our postdoc Jae-Ki Jeong and Hai-Chu Lu who's working with it at EPFL. And we certify recently 25.2% on this kind of FA-led I3 systems. So also on the current, there is a report in Science last year from Min et al., where they do reach higher than 26 milliamps per square centimeter. So I do think that we shouldn't be too surprised if we do start to see certified efficiencies getting close or even higher than 26%. In terms of passivation, there's a lot of fundamental work. I would just like to highlight the work from Sam Strang's group, where they have used coherent photoluminescence, and they use confocal photo and photoemission electron microscopies to study where do we have the traps where we have non-radiative recombination. That's what we want to avoid. And in this work in Nature, they conclude that it's not a homogeneous trap distribution. It clusters at grain junctions and grain boundaries. There's a hole trapping event which goes quickly kinetically to these trap clusters. So it's not a homogeneous non-radiative trap distribution. It's localized in grains, and that's where we have to find then strategies to passivate these recombination centers. Also, on more fundamental work, I would like to highlight the work from the Potsdam group, Dieter Neher and his team, who has published some papers on the device physics, where you can really distinguish where you have different losses in terms of transport, recombination, and so on. In this paper, which I highlight in Advanced Energy Materials, they, for example, can conclude what is the difference between the measured VOC and the causal Fermi level splitting we measure. And you can then see that it's not only one reason. It's energy level misalignment, and it's also recombination losses. And then they can, through the models, decide how much is on what topic, let's say. So there's a lot of interesting work on the device physics as well. So I just quickly mentioned that. In our own work on passivation, this is one of our highlights, where we took a molecule which is hydrophobic, and we compare that with quite a standard in the literature, the phenylethyl ammonium iodide. And here we have this kind of umbrella effect. It's a tetrabutyl, which sort of stands out, and it goes hydrophobic as a molecular layer on the perovskite surface. And one can see the hydrophobic result if we do contact angle measurement, as you see to the right with a drop of water. And you also see good efficiencies, 24%, and also very good stability over 500 hours under operation maximum power point. So it does show that the passivation decreases the non-radiative centers, but also improves stability. And here is also very recent work, ongoing work, where we do see stable devices for more than 1,400 hours. It's my postdoc Anurag Krishna who's working on this with a multifunctional, also molecular system. So on stability, here is also, I think, important for the field to mention the report with a lot of co-authors for a consensus statement on how to do stability assessment and how to report it and how to follow ICOS procedures. It's Eugene Katz and Monica Lira Canto and Mark Kenkin and many others, many groups. For example, we know that one issue with the measurement of stability is that there is a dynamic behavior where we can see that initially this efficiency goes down, reaches a constant value, and then if we switch off or we have night, let's say, without sunlight, the efficiency goes back again. So it's a reversible decline which goes back up, back and forth, and we in the paper discuss how to take that into account when we do measurements, either if we follow continuously over time or if we chop the light in cycles, let's say, as you see here. I noted a very interesting report on also scaling up like modules, and this is a report from Jiabing Qi and others in the team where you do see 2,000 hours of very good stability for modules, and this comes also from passivation of all interlayers from the tin oxide to the perovskite to the spiral layers. So this also shows demonstrate passivation effects and a very promising stability test. Coming to the end, I just want to highlight the work from UK and especially, of course, Henry, and also to congratulate him to the Becquerel Prize, which will be awarded this morning. And here they look into stabilization for tandem devices. That means that we need to go to higher band gap energies, and then you mix in bromide, and then you have iodide bromide mixture, and they have a photo effect that they segregate, and you have stability issues for segregation due to light. And here they have managed by an ionic salt, piperidinium salt, to stabilize that phase segregation and reaches thousands of hours at the ambient temperature of stability, which is very promising, and then as a top layer on a tandem cell. So I finish my state-of-the-art talk to say that a lot of interesting things are coming on the tandem devices. We have perovskite on silicon, where the Helmholtz-Berlin group has the record now at 29. And then we have on CIS or perovskite, which also shows 24.5% efficiency. And I then hand over in a way more on tandem devices by the talk by for example, the Helmholtz team during the conference. And with that, I thank you for listening. I thank my team here, LSPM at EPFL, and we are, of course, always working very closely together with Michael Gretzen's team at the LPI. So a lot of thanks to him and his team as well. And with that, I say thank you for your attention.
So Andres, thank you very much for this very nice overview about perovskite and the status there. I think you would receive a loud applause, but this is unfortunately not possible here. So we're coming now to the questions, and we have to exercise a little bit. I don't see any question which is coming in, so I invite the audience to write questions for Anders or even for the next presentation, also during the presentation. Since there is no I may ask a question for you. You presented this very nice result for the formaldinium lead iodide solar cell with a very high voltage with an efficiency of 23%. And you mentioned that the potential is 26%, but you are missing in current. Can you elaborate a little bit? What is the key for this loss in current and how you overcome that?
Yeah, for us, there are different results in the literature. Some, as I showed you, has the current. So we are looking carefully into what that means. I think it's part of it is to work a little bit more on the film thickness to make that possible. So it's a light harvesting issue, we think, mainly. So film thickness and also reflecting layers on the back as a possibility. I think that's what we think. And then also the whole transporting material needs to be non-absorbing. It may be that we have a little bit of absorption from the spiral layer. so in my point of view, for us at EPFL to keep the voltage and get higher current is a little bit to play on the light harvesting.
Okay. But would you think that your absorber layers are this high quality? So if you increase the thickness, you does not suffer from voltage losses?
Sure, it's a compromise and an optimization to do. But but you're right, of course, that can happen too. So it is quite a lot of work to keep the high quality also with a little bit thicker films. Yes.
So there is an incoming question, which is maybe also of interest in a general way. What are the main bottlenecks concerning process technology to bring the cells to market already?
I think there's a lot of scaling up to do, and people use different type of printing. There is also evaporation. Henk Bolink is doing a lot of work there. For me, I think that scaling up point, there are so many different possibilities, and industry is doing that. The big challenge for me for commercialization is more on the stability, I would say. Which is also promising, but that if we should guarantee lifetime of 20 years to use them as tandem devices on silicon, for example, then we have to have very, very little decline in efficiency per year, let's say. So I still think that for myself, I think the stability is the key thing to solve. The scaling up, I think there will be solutions for and many different possibilities as well. Inkjet, another one I think about.
I mean, there's also another question which goes to the materials. Rubidium is scarce, gold is expensive. What is the research doing with the materials that can be upscaled so that it's more cheap at the end?
Very good question. I think the gold layer we have is, of course, not to use. So it gives us the sort of Formula 1 values, let's say. That's the highest we can get. Then there are, in terms of, I think you mentioned rubidium, I don't see that as a big problem. There are recipes without it, which works very well. And if we have it, it's very, very small amount. The gold layer, we need another contact for sure. And there is also work on the reverse PIN structures where you don't have gold. So it's also here a compromise. There you may have a little bit lower efficiency at the moment. But for sure, work should be put into scalable and inexpensive materials. That's important.
There's two other questions which goes again to the question, when will it be ready for the market? So what would be your guess if you have to give a year number?
Oh yes, well, one should ask. To my knowledge, Oxford PV is doing well on tandem devices, and they are looking into scaling up. Of course, when you talk to companies, they are not, of course, saying everything where they are, but as I understand, they start to do prototypes in the coming years. And if that is good enough for real commercialization, I can't say, but that they work on pilot lines and scaling up as we speak, that's happening.
So Anders, I think we stop here. There are some more questions which you can also read later and answer also individually. So I'd like to thank once more for this very nice overview on the status on perovskite. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
And then we proceed with the next presentation, which will be given by Christoph Messmer. And I think this is something very special for this plenary session, because we should be aware that this is a student award finalist presentation. I think it's for the first time ever we have that in the opening session. So good luck for that, Christoph. The title of his presentation is The Race for the Best Silicon Bottom Cell, Efficiency and Cost Evaluation on Perovskite Silicon Tandem Solar Cells. So it's just a follow-up what we heard before from Anders about perovskite single junction cell, and at the end at the tandem structures. So Christoph, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much. So you can see my slides? Yeah.
Well, you can see it.
Okay, so I'll go straight into the key role of photovoltaics. So from today till the year 2070, PV is predicted to become the major global energy source. And for this transition to happen, there are actually two major key drivers. First of all, the cost reduction, which you can see here in the past, which has to go on in the future, but also resource efficiency when it comes to large scales. So, and both of these major key drivers can be achieved by increasing the power conversion efficiency, which is why in the past, the industrial innovation of silicon solar cells was driven by an efficiency increase of roughly 0.6% absolute per year. And right now, the PERC technology is the current standard. Passivating contact technologies like TOPCon and silicon heterojunction are supposed to surpass this technology in the future. However, there's a fundamental Auger limit for silicon solar cells of roughly 29%. So the question arises, if we want to keep this trend, what comes after, let's say, 2025 in mass production? And for this, we have to look into the physics where spectral losses limit the efficiency. So here you can see the spectrum of the sun in gray, and the silicon can only use the red part of the spectrum. But if we use a second higher bandgap material, for example, perovskite, we can more efficiently use the blue light of the spectrum. And this so-called tandem solar cell can overcome this barrier of 29%. Can overcome this barrier of 29%. But why are you using perovskite for silicon tandem solar cells? So as you can see, the bandgap can be very nicely tuned by composition variation of the A, B, and X site. Also, this material has strong absorption, which leads to less material consumption, and also it's potentially cost effective. So it reduces costs and increases resource efficiency as motivated on the first slide. And that this perovskite silicon tandem devices have been very fruitful in the past, I'll show you by a short history of the research. So in 2015, we had a first realization of a 4-terminal device, it's shown here. In the same year, we also had the first 2-terminal device with a silicon tunneling interconnection layer. 2016, the use of a rear side textured bottom cell increased the light trapping properties. 2017, the switch to the PIN structure reduced parasitic absorption. And also in the same year, in the same publication also, we've seen that the complex front electrode increased the long-term stability of the devices. 2018, a proof for textured front side was shown, which significantly reduces reflection losses. And from 2018-19 on, the perovskite silicon tandem surpassed the silicon world record shown here in red, mainly due to the better passivation quality of the perovskite absorbers. And currently, we're at a world record of 29.1% at Helmholtz Zentrum in Berlin, where I want to refer to Eike Köhnen's talk this afternoon. And also I want to refer to Patricia Schulze, who will talk this afternoon, who will talk about the results at Fraunhofer-ISE shown here by the green stars. Finally, we also have some first steps towards mass production as, for example, pursued by Oxford PV. So when we take this research on perovskite silicon tandem, shown here on the left, please allow me to merge this to the graph we had earlier in this talk to see, first of all, how rapid the progress in research of perovskite silicon tandem has been, as shown here by the green dots. So when you look at this graph, it all looks pretty simple, doesn't it? So we just take these research results and simply transfer them to industry. Of course, you might have noticed that this is a bit like comparing apples to oranges, since we have the tiny research cells compared to a cost-competitive mass product like the PERC technology. So the most important question is how to transfer this knowledge we have in the lab to industrial mass production. And this will, of course, be again driven by cost reduction and resource efficiency, and will also include challenges like upscaling and long-term stability. So, and also the question arises, which of these silicon bottom cells will be the best for the tandem application? And since this talk is about mainly the silicon bottom cell, we analyzed all these tandem research publications in terms of the silicon bottom cell. And you can see that currently the silicon heterojunction technology dominates in tandem research, as shown by the orange dots, and also the world record is a silicon heterojunction. So since this talk is called The Race for the Best Silicon Bottom Cell, please allow me to depict this by a horse race. So in the past, we had a race going on where the silicon bottom cell, the silicon heterojunction bottom cell actually lied ahead of the other technologies in terms of the cell efficiency in research. However, when it comes to industry, there's a second race going on where it's, let's say, less about velocity, but it's about a hurdle race where we have lots of hurdles coming up, which the technological feasibility, optical and electrical performance, but especially also costs and the upscaling and stability. And the goal would rather be something like minimizing the levelized cost of electricity for the owner of the PV installation. So when it comes to this race on the lower side here of the screen, my question to you is, which horse would you place a bet on? And we at Fraunhofer ISE and INATEC did a research study on these hurdles, and we tried to analyze that. And I will take this research results as these hurdles as an outline for the presentation of our study. So let's start with the technological feasibility. So our approach was to evaluate and screen possible bottom cell concepts. And we ended up with, first of all, a PERC-like bottom cell where we have a PERC rear side and an unpassivated phosphorus diffused front emitter, which is then connected to the top cell layers. Secondly, a concept we call top PERC, since it has TopCon on the front side and a PERC rear side. Then a TopCon squared, where we have N TopCon on the front and P TopCon on the rear side. And finally, also the silicon heterojunction with the amorphous silicon contacts. So we had these four basic bottom cell concepts, and for each we had two interconnection layers. First of all, a TCO recombination layer shown on the left, but also a silicon-based tunneling junction as shown here on the right. And for each of these, we elaborated detailed process flows as shown here for industrial realization, which we took as a basis for our efficiency and cost evaluation, which is now to come in the presentation. So we go to the second hurdle, which is the optical performance. So we had a simulation model based on an experiment on our experiments. So here you can see the perovskite silicon heterojunction, which is presented by Patricia this afternoon. And for this, we measured the external quantum efficiencies and reflection, and then compared it to our optical simulation. And we gained a very good description of the experimental data of this whole layer stack. And for details, I want to refer to a paper which is currently under revision, shown here in the bottom. And in the second step, we optimized and current matched each tandem concept for the industrial realization. And with this, we move on to the electrical performance, where our modeling approach was to take the optimized optics from the validated model and pass it through a very simple perovskite top cell model, where we had no detailed electrical simulation, but we had this for a filtered spectrum for the bottom cell, for which we then did a full simulation with a Quokka 3 simulation tool. And this leads me to the first results of this study. So Here you can see the current matched JSC for each bottom cell concept I presented before. And first of all, you can see that the PERC-like bottom cell has the lowest JSC, mainly due to emitter losses of the unpassivated emitter. The other cell concepts gain higher JSC, and the JSC here is mainly counterbalanced by the parasitic absorption in the TOPCon layers and the TCO layers. For the open circuit voltage, you can see that moving from the left to the right, the passivating contacts increase the VOC due to higher passivation quality, which also increases the fill factor, which is not shown here. Thirdly, we could then go on and estimate a tandem efficiency by assuming a constant VMPP for the perovskite top cell. And with this, we ended up with the tandem efficiencies shown here for each bottom cell concept, for which the PERC concept yielded 29% in efficiency, and the other concepts yielded around 30 to 33%. We can not only do this for a textured front side, but also for planar front side, where we see that the efficiency is lowered by 1.5% roughly in absolute efficiency. And we can also do this for the different interconnection layers and for monofacial devices, but I do not show this here, but I refer to our paper, which will come up soon. So moving on to the third hurdle, the costs, we did a cost analysis based on an S-cost model at Fraunhofer-ISE. Here you can see the bottom cell costs first for a PERC reference, which is a single junction. So you can see the wafer costs, equipment costs, process consumables, and many others, which ended up to be at 56 euro cents per bottom cell. And if we compare this to the bottom cell of the PERC-like structure, we see, first of all, that's less in cost, but this is mainly since we have no metal grid at the front side. However, if we compare these to the other bottom cells, we see that the top PERC bottom cell yields a similar cost than the PERC bottom cell. However, the TOPCon squared and the silicon heterojunction concept yield higher costs. When we move to the all-in module costs per watt peak, so here in this graph, you can see that the all-in cell costs are now in the lower part, and we have then the perovskite and the module production costs on top of this. We can see that all tandem concepts yield a similar cost in terms of the module costs per watt peak. And here it is divided by the module output power. You have to keep this in mind, because if we then compare this to the PERC reference, which is a single junction, we see that actually the additional perovskite costs for the tandem devices are compensated by the increase in module output power, so that in the end we end up to have similar costs for the tandem devices than for the PERC reference, which is a single junction, within the uncertainties of our model. Finally, I want to also show the levelized cost of electricity, LCOE. So here you see the LCOE shown over the cell efficiency, first of all for the PERC reference. And the higher the cell efficiency would be, of course, the lower the costs. However, in our example, we took a 22.5% PERC reference, which ended up at 6.9 euro cents per kilowatt hour. So if we compare this then with our tandem devices, we see, first of all, that the costs would be higher for the same cell efficiency. However, we're lying around 29 to 30%, which ends up that all perovskite silicon tandem devices significantly reduce the LCOE with respect to the PERC single junction. However, we can also see that the perovskite silicon tandem, that all perovskite silicon tandem concepts yield a similar LCOE within the uncertainties of our model. So with this, I want to come back, and this brings me to my conclusion. I want to come back to the horse race, or actually the hurdle race. In this talk, I've shown you that we developed a comprehensive model to evaluate the perovskite silicon tandem devices, at least in terms of these first four hurdles you see here, in order to get an estimate on the levelized cost of electricity for this new technology, which is to come up. And we put 4 different bottom cell technologies into this race. And we've seen that all perovskite silicon tandems actually lower the LCOE within our model with respect to the PERC single junction. However, we have to keep in mind that the PERC technology is a technology which already overcame all these hurdles and is a real technology already in the market, whereas the perovskite silicon tandem devices and also each bottom cell concept could still stumble upon one of these hurdles. And especially, we didn't talk so much about the last 2 hurdles here, which is, first of all, upscaling and production, but also stability, long-term stability, and the field performance. So these final 2 hurdles are actually very important, and this technology has to prove itself in the future, which is a very exciting race. But if we are quite optimistic also about these last 2 hurdles, actually we've seen that this race for the best silicon bottom cell is still open. So it's an exciting head-to-head race, which is very good news for production lanes based on the PERC technology and also iTopCon technology, and which is actually the major share of production lanes today. So with this, I want to thank DBU and the Money2 project for funding, and also especially you for your attention. Thank you.
So Christoph, thank you very much for this very nice overview, and also for this promising view in the future that we will have most probably tandems in the market which can be cost effective, but with all these discussions on the silicon bottom cells. So there are now a lot of questions coming in, and I want to start with the very first one, which was asked by Pierre Verlinden. In costs, $1 per watt on the tandem modules, did you include the capex cost of the production line? If so, what did you consider as capex? The costs for $1 per watt peak when you show
for the modules
for the tandem modules, did you include also the capex costs?
Yeah, so we had so this calculation is actually based on it's called an CEST tool, which is by Sebastian Nold, where you can also look up this in his dissertation, which is actually a very comprehensive model. And so also, as far as I know, the capex costs are also in this, but I have no details about this now. I have to refer to Sebastian Nold to this. So actually, yeah.
Okay, maybe another short question, the last one, then we have to continue from Hubert Aulich. What are the stability and prediction on lifetime for this model?
The LCOE, as you can see here, the assumptions are here in the inset of this graph. So actually, we were very optimistic about these these final 2 hurdles. So we had a lifetime comparable to the silicon standalone technology. So of course, this is not proven yet. Where we know that this is not a realistic scenario, but it could actually. I mean, this technology has to prove in long-term stability, which is very important for this technology. But for our study, we took a realistic and comparable scenario to the single junction. Of course, this is an assumption which we did and which has to be proven by this technology in the future.
So with that, I want to stop here. There are still coming questions in, which we will look later on and try to answer it for everyone. So thanks again, Christoph, and all the best for your Student Award finalist race. This is another race which maybe you win or others. All the best. And that with that, I like to hand over to Jeff Portmans to chair the rest of the session.
Thank you, Andreas, for doing so well. I have to say it's quite an experience to do it this way. So let's indeed immediately go on in order to respect the time schedule. And the next presentation will be done by Dr. Inigo Ramiro. He will talk about intermediate band solar cells, present and future. I just want to add to that he has been working, he got his PhD degree at the University of Madrid in 2015. He did a short visit at University College of London, and he is specializing on this subject of intermediate band solar cells. So, Inigo, you have the floor. I'm not, yeah, you should unmute. You should unmute.
Yes.
So you're seeing the screen now, right? Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Jeff. So I will talk about the present and future of intermediate band solar cells. These are high efficiency concept of solar cells that was conceived more than 20 years ago. And during this time, the field has advanced greatly, pointing to different directions. So we believe it's now the right moment to look at it with some perspective and evaluate where our efforts should be addressed in the present. And this is what I will try to do in this talk. For this, I will briefly discuss the origins of the intermediate band solar cells and review the fundamentals. Then I will make an overview of its development during the past 2 decades. And I will discuss what we believe the future of intermediate band solar cells may be. With that, I will move to the conclusions. So let's begin. Here you can see the evolution of the PV price of the silicon PV modules, the price of silicon PV modules. And up to around 2005, the price was still of several dollars per watt peak, which made PV unable to compete with conventional energy sources. So at that time, the PV community tried to recover some ideas for high efficiency PV concepts and bring them to life. For example, multi-junction solar cells, hot carrier solar cells, impact ionization, or multiple extra generation solar cells, as well as intermediate band solar cells. And the goal behind was to try to decrease the PV energy price by using very high efficiency devices. So let's briefly review the fundamentals of the intermediate band solar cells. For this, as you all know, I will describe what a conventional solar cell looks like. So as you all know, it consists of a single gap semiconductor, which has gap E sub G. It's a sandwich between 2 electron and hole selective contacts. And the band gap is of the semiconductor will set
Inigo, I would like to interrupt you for a moment. There are some problems with the bandwidth. Could you maybe switch off your camera, then maybe you reduce this problem so that you are not using the bandwidth just to show your image. So
okay.
Yeah, so you can continue now. Hello. I hope he didn't get out of the studio. Hello. We don't hear anything anymore now. Yeah, it seems we have a problem with Inigo. So I propose then, in order to take care of this, it's very annoying, but so I would like to invite Dr. Deria Baram to start her presentation. I'm going to limit myself to saying just a few words. So you studied in Turkey, where you studied at the Middle East Technical University. You got a doctorate degree in Nuremberg, and you did some postdoc studies in Germany, Jülich, and in London. And since 2017, you are with King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Jeddah. So after this short introduction, I would like Dr. Baran to start her presentation.
Perfect. You can hear me well?
Yes, I do hear you well.
Okay, I'll go to my presentation mode. Can you see my screen as well?
That's also perfect. So,
all right, I'll try to use it. So, hello everyone. I'm Daria. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk in the plenary session as my first virtual conference as well. And we are having very unpredicted days, and I hope everybody is doing well and healthy. So today, after all the exciting efficiencies and technologies and scale-up talks, I will be shifting the gear a little bit towards organic photovoltaics and give you a brief history about what has happened in the last couple of years, along with the other technologies, and talk about non-fluorine acceptors specifically. But before that, I would like to thank the people who has contributed one way or another to this talk, especially my team members, Jules, Shri, and Aran, and also our alumni, Dr. Nicola Gasparini, who's a research fellow at Imperial College now, and Dr. Xin Song, who is actually getting his professorship back in China. Of course, our collaborators who made all these work possible together as well. So I guess in the next few days in EU PVSEC, there will be a lot of discussions about different PV technologies, and organic photovoltaics is one of them. And that's why I wanted to start with the question of efficiency. Like, should we really care about the efficiency of OPV now? And if you look to this left graph, a couple of years ago, around 2016, where it was around 11 to 12% efficiencies, maybe I would tell you no, but we should still use their niche applications, their lightweight, etc. But now with the rise of perovskites and the silicon solar cells got so cheap, etc., then we were like, should we? But then what happened as a breakthrough in these similar times in the end of 2016, non-fluorine acceptors emerged as an alternative to the workhorse fluorine acceptors over the last 20 years in the OPV history. And very quickly, this efficiency limit that was set by Markus Schaber back in 2006 and revisited back in 2016 as a single junction efficiency limit of OPV has exceeded in a very, very short time. And we were able to achieve around 14% single junction solar cells. And we made a quick estimation of actually where OPV can go with this new type of acceptors now. And we have seen that it is sort of possible to achieve around 20% power conversion efficiencies if we could actually mitigate or eliminate this 0.6 EV voltage losses in these particular solar cells, which was sort of hypothetical at that point because it was known that you need around 0.3 EV for the efficient exciton generation, etc. But now, a couple of years later, in 2020, when we look to the same graph, and I think is already beyond 80.2 now, that OPV had a huge jump with these non-fluorine acceptors. And I want to just tell you what has happened, how it happened, and what is the limit where it goes with these numbers, and what should we think as a next step. So very briefly, I would like to give some credit to the workhorse fluorines because they have answered a lot of questions in the OPV field. And we knew that very little driving energy is only required from the this electron affinities with the fluorines and to the polymer and to dissociate the excitons. But what was the limit was actually to separating these charges into efficient solar cells. And there, although there have been several different type of fullerenes available, only very few of them worked very efficiently with several polymers, and ICBA was one of them, and it was very selective to the donor, actually. And for this reason, NFAs came in the right time, I would say, just when I was having my postdoc. It's back in Imperial College. And then this beautiful simple NFBR was synthesized. And when we compared it with PCBM, we have seen that actually a very fast rise in the polarons, you know, and it was working efficiently as a solar cell. But when we look at the long time dynamics, then we have also seen that these polarons were actually disappearing and was not as good as P3HD PCBM, although we got around 4% efficiencies. And it was simply because of this twisted structure of the FBR that reduces the tendency to crystallize. And then the group I was in, Professor Ian McGullagh, they actually then synthesized this coplanar IDTBR structure, as you see here as well, which was beautifully planar. And then you could see that it tended to aggregate and create beautiful crystals. And in the heterojunction, we have seen that there was a long diffusion of excitons to the interface, which is what is more expected from the OPV bulk heterojunction. And these characteristics allowed about 6.6% efficiencies. And at that time, this was the highest P3HD solar cells. And very specifically from this combination, we have quickly realized that this specific P3HD IDTBR has exceptionally low recombination rates, and then it was purely bimolecular as well, and also field-independent charge generation, simply what you look from a solar cell, I would say. And then this quickly allowed us making half micron and all bladed in-air devices. And I think some of the companies that are interested in OPV now are scaling this technology up, which is quite exciting to see. And in the research side, what we did was obviously to scale up, or thinking to commercialize, you need to move away from chlorinated solvents. And we were able to achieve efficient cells without using any chlorinated solvents, and also with larger areas up to 2 square centimeters without losing any performance, which was really amazing news. And my PhD student Daniel was inspired from the bio and marine biology department at KAUST and made a beautiful marine turtle and in free form, utilizing the digitally inkjet printing method for this. So, but obviously for research purposes, I think most of you would agree that the P3HD is not that exciting. And then there are lots of other donors out there simply because of the huge voltage loss from the P3HD to the other acceptors. And this graph was actually quite seminal also in the energetic loss history of OPV, because when you look at that between the donor and acceptors, there was this 0.6 EV I mentioned earlier as the voltage loss set, I would say. Even you use different donor acceptor combinations, when the voltage loss was lower than the 0.6, then you were not able to achieve any decent external quantum efficiencies. So our question was like, could we now decrease this number with non-fullerene acceptors whilst we keep the photocurrent generation high? And for that purpose, I use the FBR acceptor with an aggregated tendency polymer, which I will call as Y4 here, synthesized by Henry Yan at the time, and also in combination with IDTBR. So the particular case here, as you see, the electron affinity difference between these donor and acceptor are quite small, and smaller than 0.3 even. And then, as I said earlier, it has been shown that the exciton dissociation is not limited to this 0.3, but the charge separation was. So in this case, what we have seen was also quite nice long polymer exciton lifetime, because it was a semi-crystalline donor, and then high polaron yield. This was very interesting and exciting, despite this low energetic offset from this particular blends. And when we look at the solar cell performances, we were able to achieve 10% solar cells with actually really nice open circuit voltages, about 1.04, which was also another set limit at the time, going beyond 1 volt with decent external quantum efficiencies. So with this particular blend, then this gap 0.44 was accompanied by a 1.04 voltage, which brings this voltage loss around 0.4 EV. And then the main reason for this was obviously in the radiative recombination, because we quickly realized that the non-fluorine acceptors in combination with the polymer donors are able to have much higher order of the radiative recombination compared to the fluorine ones, which was quite exciting. And with that, we could calculate the voltage losses or non-radiative losses, you could say, and compared it even to the different technologies. So here you can see the fluorine derivatives with polymers and CIGS and silicon. And as you know, they are limited on the open circuit voltage. And here are some of the perovskite manuscripts at that time. And here non-fluorine acceptors are quite exciting because we could get really good open circuit voltages with extremely low voltage losses. And coming back to the graph I showed you now, we were able to actually reduce this voltage loss and keep the EQE as high as possible. And actually following this work over the years, now I think there are data points where you can see EQEs up to 90% and also lower voltage losses. I hope you follow at the moment because I only see my screen. So after that, we actually used a commercially available polymer called PTP78 or PC10 and compared it with fluorine versus the non-fluorine acceptors. So here you see a PC10 IDTBR device's external quantum efficiency, where it has like a beautifully flat EQE over the range of 550 to 700, and then has an absorption edge around 800 nanometers compared to fluorine derivative. But and we achieved around 11 to 12% efficiencies. But we quickly realized one beauty with these NFAs are that you can tune the band gap, and because these are push-pull type materials or not direct materials, then you can cover a very selective region of the or the solar spectrum rather than perovskites covering the whole spectrum and have a band edge, as you see here in the graphs. So thinking that, like as you see here in the PC10 and IDTBR has overlapping absorptions, which makes it very interesting because it still works as 11-12% solar cell, then we thought, like, what if we shift this NFA and we designed an NFA with a low band gap? What would happen? And obviously, as you see here in the EQE, the band edge now is much lower, and we improved the power conversion efficiency simply because utilizing the low energy of the spectrum, and got 12.8% solar cells. And by combining it with a novel solution processable bilayer transport layer, I would say, we further increase this ohmic contact in these devices and improve the efficiency up to 13.2%. And this unique bilayer ohmic contact has been used in several different technologies, not only in OPV. It was working quite well with the perovskites, transistors, and we recently published in an ES as Joel's story. So then why I show this very interesting, because the particular photocurrent from this PC10 4F is about 26 millivolt from a single junction, milliamps from a single junction solar cell. And when you compare it with different technologies, it's quite impressive for such a low band gap material. And again, such a high current density. So with now OPV, we can achieve very good voltages and we can have competitive photocurrent densities. And now the question would be, like, maybe to maximize the fill factor. And then, as you see, it is not that bad and can be also competitive with different emerging technologies. Yeah,
Daria, 2 minutes.
So To increase that further, actually, we use the concept called ternary. I'll just quickly move from here with using our all previous knowledge, where we can use a third component to boost the performance of these solar cells. We actually add a third component and then able to increase the power conversion efficiency further. And again, I will say that I will skip, but this was simply because increasing the coherence length of the both donor and acceptor as the third component, and it was also a sensitizer to increase the current. And lastly, that we used the same approach in one of the high efficiency systems now known as PM6Y6 series. Then this series also changed the game lately. Then that allowed actually 18% solar cells. And in this particular blend, we improved the efficiency up to 16.6%. And not only efficiency, in this case, we have observed that the particular photostability of this blend that is known as unstable is improved dramatically while we are reducing the photo-induced traps actually in the binary system. So coming to my last slides, I was questioning, okay, we're having really good competitive efficiencies now, and cost we can discuss, but what would be the real application for these technologies? And I really think it can be found in agrivoltaics, simply because we can now modulate or tune the transmission and where it can absorb, etc. We are able to now actually tune this absorption so that plants would love what we tune in these polymer NFA blends, and then we can use in greenhouses. And with this idea, we decided to bring it to scale up in a startup in the desert where we live. And then as Iris, we are aiming to have advanced desert greenhouses in the near future, scaling up this technology. And I'd like to share this information, which is actually quite exciting for an OPV researcher. Like, we are now able to achieve 50% AVT devices, including the HDL and the top layers, and reaching up to 10% and up to 12% power conversion efficiencies, which is quite exciting. So with that, I'd like to ask them, what is the limit where it can go? Again, coming back to this 20%, now it doesn't seem that far. And what we can push is, I see the fill factor, and the answer to that fill factor can be found in the radiative recombination. So if we can design new materials to increase the radiative recombination, we can actually get up to 80-85% for here 1.7 EV systems. And obviously degradation and reliability of these systems, and spoken in the previous talk, and lots of other factors, if you would like to go for commercial viability, should be assessed along with these advantages. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I hope I have some questions.
Thank you very much, Teria, for this very insightful presentation. Actually, I'm happy to see that OPV is back on the scene. Actually, there seems to be a periodicity of 15-20 years. Everything comes back at a certain moment. Now, of course, the key question is also the question which is asked by the audience. You shortly touched upon stability. Now, how do you see it evolve? I mean, you have seen the excellent results or the excellent progress in perovskites. Do you think we will be able to realize the same, or how do you see that?
Well, I don't want to bring it to a perovskites versus OPV or different technologies, but I think the stability issues will remain similar in all technologies, right? Which is encapsulation, oxygen, humidity, water. So we should, let's say, move together and learn from each other in this, I would say. Of course, OPV is very competitive in terms of stability, and there are some studies showing that they're stable for tens of thousands of hours at ambient conditions, and for instance, like high light intensities, humid conditions. So inherently, OPV doesn't have any ion migration, luckily, and then has some other inherent advantages as well. But again, coming back to environmental problems, we will have to work on this all together to make it a commercially viable technology.
Okay, thank you very much, Teria. There are still a few questions, but I would like to stop here and to go back to the previous presentation. I think we still have to give Inigo the right place in this session. So thanks again for the nice presentation.
Enjoy.
Inigo, are you ready to start presenting
yes,
again?
if you can hear me.
I can hear you perfectly, yes.
Okay, I switch off the cam. Let's hope that the network works better now.
Okay, so you can start off from where you left it.
Okay, so what I was saying is that the high PV price at the time before 2007 motivated research in previously theoretized high efficiency PV concepts. So a lot of experimental work was done in these concepts, in particular in intermediate band solar cells. And I left here where I was explaining the fundamentals of the IBSC. I was saying that the band gap is what limits both the current and the voltage, of single gap solar cell. And there is a compromise between voltage and current such that if one lowers the band gap, the current goes up, but at the expense of a reduced voltage. So this is what the intermediate band solar cell wants to break with. And the idea is that introducing an intermediate band in between the valence and the conduction band, we are able to exploit absorptions of photons like this, which have energy lower than the band gap. And with this 2-photon absorption, the current can be increased, and we don't have such a high voltage loss. So by combining this increasing absorption and maintaining a high voltage, we can get high efficiency. This is what I plot here. This is a graph of the efficiency versus band gap for maximum sunlight concentration for the intermediate band solar cell, which is in red, and the single gap solar cell, which is in blue. Let me just briefly comment that this calculation has been made assuming a very narrow intermediate band. If one takes into account the width of the intermediate band and plays with that parameter, you get different scenarios and slightly different numbers, such as in the so-called photon ratchet intermediate band solar cell. But let's say in the classical picture, we get higher than 60% efficiency for band gaps between 1.5 and 2.5 electron volts, to be compared with the 40% for single gap solar cell at maximum concentration. So this has, as you can imagine, motivated research on large band gap materials as intermediate band candidates. And the issue of what materials to use was mainly scientific and not so much of an economic nature, because these very high efficiencies were only achieved at high concentrations. So this kind of allows the use of expensive materials and or fabrication methods. Okay, so let's see what the intermediate band solar cell has been given in the past 20 years. There are mainly 4 approaches, 4 ways of implementing an intermediate band material. The first one to be proposed and explored was the use of quantum dots. And in this approach...
Inigo, can I interrupt you? Are you on slide 5 still?
No, I'm on slide 10.
Tja. It's not changing. I'm still seeing slide 5.
Well, you should not, because this is changing in all my screens.
Yeah, but I get the message that you should stop screen sharing and that you have to start again with entire screen.
Okay. Okay. So can you see the screen now?
No. Yeah, now I see it, but I see again slide 5.
Now? 6?
Yeah, 6. Yes, okay. But maybe go to slide 10, the ones which you were discussing.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Otherwise,
just let me say that.
only have 15.
Yeah. Okay. So I was saying that there are 4 ways of implementing the intermediate band solar cell. I was saying quantum dot was the first one proposed, where the intermediate band stems from confined level in the quantum dots. So I'm drawing red lines here. Another one is to use impurities that introduce deep levels inside the bulk semiconductor, and these deep levels would play the role of the intermediate band. A third approach is to use highly mismatched alloys. And these materials are a special kind of alloy in which the inclusion of a small element causes the split of one of the bands into 2. So we get, as plotted here, a band in the middle that we would call the intermediate band. And finally, it was proposed the use of organic molecules in which the singlet and triplet states, molecular states, play the role of the intermediate band. And by combining low band gap molecules that we will call sensitizers, but via the process of triple annihilation, we can create an electron hole pair in the large band gap absorber. So these are the 4 approaches. I will tell you a little bit about the state of the art in these approaches. As it concerns the intermediate band solar cell maturity, organic molecules are the least advanced because they were proposed very recently, and there are only a few devices fabricated so far. When it comes to deep level impurities or high mismatch alloys, these two have been much more studied. In particular, they have given very good results in terms of extra photocurrent, but there is an important reduction in voltage due to non-radiative recombination. So these technologies still need further study to assess fully their potential. And finally, quantum dot has been the most explored and successful technology so far. It has demonstrated the operation principles of intermediate band solar cells, but still no practical device with an increased efficiency has been demonstrated. So we will see why. I will briefly comment on the shortcomings of the quantum dot IBSC. The first one is that there is extra non-radiative recombination in the quantum dot, and this is due to a high density of confined levels, as you can see in the graph. And this high density of levels actually is due to a rather or a somewhat large lateral size of the quantum dots, which in turn depends or is inherent to the fabrication method of the dots, because in the IB community, when we are talking about quantum dots, we refer to usually to epitaxial quantum dots, and they tend to grow like in this lentil shape. Another issue that we have is the low absorption below the band gap, so low absorption in the quantum dots. And this is due to the low volumetric concentration of quantum dots, that is in the order of 10 to the 15, 10 to the 16 centimeter minus 3. And as you can see here, I have said the 2 regions where the quantum dot absorbed. You can see that in this graph of photocurrent versus wavelength, you can see that the photocurrent produced in the 2 shaded regions is much weaker than the one above the band gap. So still, the absorption needs to be enhanced a lot. And finally, I want to comment on the economical part. These epitaxial are expensive to grow because they require technologies such as molecular bioepitaxy or molecular metal organic chemical vapor deposition, something like this. So this is, or maybe also an issue. So up to now, the present, let's see what we think the future of IBSC may be. And let's go back to the first graph of the price of silicon PV module. And if we look now at the present, we see that the price has decreased a lot. It is around now 0.3 watt per dollar per watt peak. And we think that in this new low price context, the best or the ideal scenario for an intermediate band solar cell would be to achieve high efficiency in a low cost material that we can use, we can operate at 1 sun. So we kind of propose a shift in the mindset from very high efficiency devices under concentrated light to cheap devices that can work under one sun. So the first question that comes to mind now is it still a good idea to use an intermediate band solar cell without concentration, so at one sun? The answer, we think, is yes. To support that, I showed here the plot of the efficiency against the band gap, as I did in the beginning of the presentation for high concentration. This is for one sun. And you can see that the intermediate band solar cell achieves efficiencies well over 40%, still at one sun. And it does so for a very broad range of band gaps between 1.5 and 3.5 electron volts. So we think there is a vast variety of materials that can be explored as an absorber for an IPSC working at one sun. But between this large variety of materials that we can explore, in this presentation, we will focus on one technology, which is colloidal quantum dots. So we propose a shift from the epitaxial quantum dots that provided a very good demonstration for the intermediate band principles to colloidal quantum dots that I call here self-standing nanocrystals, to differentiate them from the epitaxial quantum dots in the sense that they do not have a surrounding material. So they are just self-standing. And we think that these colloidal quantum dots are a technology that can overcome all the shortcomings of epitaxial quantum dots. And I will tell you now why. The first problem that we saw was the excessive non-relative recombination due to a high density of confining levels. This can be solved in the colloidal quantum dot technology because since these quantum dots can be synthesized in a very low size, very small sizes, there is truly a zero density of states between the intermediate band and any of the other two gaps. So this way we can reduce this non-relative recombination. The second problem was the low absorptivity of quantum dots, and this was due to the very low volumetric density. And with colloidal quantum dots, we can achieve volumetric densities of 3 or 4 orders of magnitudes higher. And in this line, we have been exploring lead sulfide as one of possible candidates. And recently, we have measured the absorption coefficient of lead sulfide quantum dots in a film to be 10 to the 4, around 10 to the 4 centimeter minus 1 in both transitions involving the intermediate band. And I remind the audience that this absorption coefficient, this value is similar to the one of gallium arsenide, for example, so it's a very strong absorber. And finally, it was the issue of the money. And this technology can be synthesized by low temperature wet chemical routes. And the device can be solution processed, so it's a pretty cheap technology. Let me just say one more thing, a comment on a breakthrough that was in material science a few years ago, with the discovery that these self-standing colloidal quantum dots can actually be epitaxially aligned inside a matrix. For example, the first material made was lead sulfide quantum dots epitaxially aligned in a perovskite matrix. And with these two cases, the self-standing quantum dot CQD and the colloidal quantum dot in a matrix, we pictured two alternatives for making an intermediate band solar cell, which would consist simply in this simple sketch of just sandwiching either of the two materials between electron and hole selective contacts. And we think that both possibilities are good candidates to fabricate IPSCs working at one sun. There's, of course, pros and cons for each of them. So the one on the left, the self-standing colloidal quantum dot, is less complex, and there are a wide variety of available materials that can be synthesized in colloidal quantum dot form. On the other hand, in the CQDM, there is fewer available materials because this is a very new branch of a very new material family, only a few years of age. But we think that we may achieve higher mobilities for the carrier extraction with this approach. The reason is sketched down here, and is because in the CQD approach, we need to rely on hopping from dot to dot for current transport. And this tends to give very low mobilities or somewhat low mobilities, while in the CQDM approach, carriers transport take place inside the bulk materials, which can be very high. For example, using a perovskite, and as we commented before.
Can you conclude, Ingenio?
Yes. Yes. So the last slide is just the proof of concept of this kind of materials. This is a work by Hosokawa and co-workers, and they built the first IBSC made of metal-fied colloidal quantum dot inside a perovskite matrix. They demonstrated both photocurrent due to absorption in the perovskite and absorption in the quantum dots, although absorption, the photocurrent due to absorption in the quantum dot is still a bit weak. So this points to further research and increase maybe the quantum dot concentration and or device thickness, but still it's a big step forward to this new approach. So let me conclude just by saying that the operation principles have been demonstrated, that we propose to switch from very high efficiencies to just high efficiencies devices at one sun in this new approach. And we think that colloidal quantum dot based intermediate band materials are a good candidate because they can deliver high efficiency at low cost. And if there's any question, I'm happy to take it.
Okay, thank you, Inigo. In view of time, I'm only going to allow one question. And it's a question which is probably raised by several people. So the typical device size and area that you're talking about, what is it today?
Okay, so today still we are at laboratory level. So and it depends on the technology that we're talking about, but we are talking about small devices, maybe in the millimeter square range. So it's still in the past years there has been a lot of experimental work to unravel the physics and understand how we could manufacture these materials, which technology was best, and if all the principles could be demonstrated. And once that we have done so, it is the moment we think to try to look at a device that can be, as you comment, manufactured with a practical area and with a practical cost. But at the moment, these devices are just the laboratory scale, which are pretty small.
Okay. I would like to close here then. Thanks a lot for the answer. A short summary of the session. I think we have seen 4 very good presentations showing a lot about what the future of photovoltaics could look like, based on advanced devices, based on organic or perovskite layers, and in combination with silicon. We have seen we are really not at the end of what we can do to bring PV forward. I think that's the best way in which we can say that this session was a fantastic introduction to this conference. And actually we were confronted with some child diseases still, but I think it gives you a good flavor of what this conference has a promise in terms of innovation. By this, I would like to close. I would like to thank the speakers. I would like to thank the other chair, Andreas. And I would like to mention that, well, in principle, there was a short break foreseen, but there will be no break. We will, after a few minutes, start with the Becquerel Prize ceremony around a few minutes after 10. Thank you, everybody, for attending this first session of the European PVSEC conference, and hope to see all of you again in a physical way next year. Thank you.
Hey, I'm pleased to welcome everybody back with a short break while we rearranged the backstage. Now we're ready for the Becquerel Prize award ceremony. I'm not going to keep any longer. I'm just going to hand over now directly to Professor Joachim Luther, who is the chair of the Becquerel Prize committee, and he is going to guide you through the award ceremony for the next 30 minutes or so. Thank you, Joachim. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's, of course, a great pleasure and honor to welcome this year's Becquerel Prize winner, Professor Henry Snaith from Oxford. He received the award in honor of his groundbreaking work on solar cells based on organic, inorganic, halide perovskites. Henry, do you want to say some words?
Well, thank you very much, Joachim, and thank you very much for the prize selection committee for awarding me this award this year. I'm extremely honored. It's a fantastic moment, and thank you for recognizing the research we've been doing on perovskites. Thank you very much.
Yeah, wonderful. Now we will hear the laudatio, and this laudatio will be given by Dr. Pierre Verlinden, who is the Becquerel Prize winner 2019. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Luther, and congratulations, Henry, and good morning, everyone. As you introduced the Becquerel Prize every year at the EU PVSEC, we congratulate and we celebrate one of our colleagues to honor a special merit in technology and science in photovoltaics. And also, I don't know how to move to the next slides. Sorry, but really sorry about this. So basically, hello everybody. The artist is working without a net. It's my great pleasure and honor and privilege to introduce Professor Henry Snaith as the winner of the Becquerel Prize 2020. We celebrate also this year the 200-year anniversary of the birth of Edmond Becquerel. And that means that we have 180 years of history of photovoltaics. So Professor Henry James Snaith, his initials are HJS, which means that he could have decided to work on heterojunction silicon. That would have been exciting, but no, he decided to work on something newer and even more exciting, the organic and inorganic hybrid material called perovskite and perovskite silicon tandem cells. And if you have seen the graph of the efficiency record of laboratory cells, you could see that the perovskite material has shown extremely fast growth over the last few years. So Henry's vision is the same as all of us, is to transform the energy economy to have 100% electricity generated by renewable energy. That means that by 2050, we need to cumulatively deploy about 70 to 80 terawatt of PV. This is a big challenge, but it's not a competition between technologies. We need all of them. And particularly as today, efficiency is extremely important. I could say efficiency has never been as important as it is today. So Henry received his master's degrees in physics from the University of Bristol, and then his PhD from the University of Cambridge. After 2 years as a postdoc researcher at EPFL in 2004-2006, he returned to the University of Cambridge as a postdoc and a senior research fellow, and then he moved to the University of Oxford in 2007, first as a senior research fellow, and then became professor in 2012. In over 20 years of his very young career, and of which about 8 years been dedicated to development of perovskite, Henry has published over 350 peer-reviewed papers and has 200 granted patents at this point, which is fairly impressive. And we could say that his work is in great part responsible for the efficiency record that we have today of 29% for perovskite tandem solar cell, monolithic perovskite tandem solar cell, which is very impressive, and it's still growing. If you look at the list of the prize that he received over the last 10 years, he received almost a prize or award, at least one every year. He received, for example, in 2015, the IEEE PVSEC Young Professional Award. He received the James Joule Medal from the Institute of Physics. He even he's been nominated as one of the hottest researchers in the world, which is somewhat impressive. So on top of his, or in addition of his position as a professor of the University of Oxford, he's also founder of two very important startups. He's a co-founder and chief scientist officer from Oxford PV, which is a very successful startup that has the ambition to commercialize and bring to the market the perovskite silicon tandem technology as early as 2022, or maybe even before, maybe end of 2021. So this is really getting very close to commercialization of the technology. He's also co-founder of another startups called Helio Material, and this startup is aiming at commercializing light-emitting perovskite devices. So join me to congratulate Henry Snaith as the winner of the Becquerel Prize 2020. Thank you very much.
Okay, Pierre, thank you very much.
Sorry for the slide, Joachim. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, it's a pity because you had so nice slides and funny slides. Maybe we can display it afterwards. Sometimes this happens, and we are all new to this type of conference. So, Pierre, thank you very much. And I appreciated that you knew all this by heart. Okay, now we come to the presentation of the official presentation of the prize by the European Commission, and the prize will be delivered by Piotr Szymanski. He is Director of Energy, Transport and Climate at the Joint Research Center in Ispra. Piotr, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and a privilege for the European Commission to announce that the Becquerel Prize Committee has selected our distinguished colleague, who I'm supposed to now have on my left side. Exactly, Henry. So it's a pleasure that the committee, to announce to you that the committee nominated you as the winner of the 2020 Alexander Edmund Becquerel Prize. Now, contribution of Henry Snaith to the field has been beautifully described just before. So I just repeat that this award is made to honor your outstanding contribution to the development of high-efficiency, solid-state organometal halide perovskite solar cells, but even more of being instrumental in the creation of a complete new research field, which for every scientist is really unbelievable great achievement. So it's a great pleasure to hand over a prize to you. This is the prize. And now, thanks to the modern technology, it will just go. Exactly. Congratulations and thanks a lot for your contribution. Best of luck in your future career. Over.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm speechless, actually, but I'm delighted, absolutely delighted to receive this prize. And it's an absolute honor. So thank you very, very much for you and the committee as well.
So now I guess your presentation.
I have a longer speech than I've got choreographed.
No, it's everybody is willing to hear from you. So we should get people the best they can get owning.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I guess I run straight into my talk then, and we seem to be live. So firstly, I just say thank you very much. It's an absolute honor to be here virtually, even virtually. It's great. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our journey with perovskites, metal halide perovskites, put them into context with respect to the rest of the PV community, and show you where we're going commercially to industrialize these. So now this did work a second ago. Oh no, we seem to be having, they're going. Okay, so silicon. Silicon is an amazing material. It is powering the world today. I'm not going to go into how PV is getting cheaper and deployment is growing, but in principle, if we keep going at this rate for just one more decade, we'll be at the sort of scale that we can think about feasibly generating most or significant fraction of the power demands for the world. It's been winning for a long time, and if you work in silicon, you'd be forgiven for thinking maybe we don't need anything better or anything else. But there's been a whole community of people and researchers trying to find things that are different to silicon, that maybe do solar power conversion efficiency either in a better way or in an alternative way. And originally, the motivation for this sort of research in emerging photovoltaics or new materials was to deliver something that was fundamentally cheaper than silicon. Now, simply through industrial scaling, silicon has got fundamentally cheap. And now the opportunity really is about, can we make something that produces more power? And it really is about efficiency. Is there a way of either enhancing silicon or finding new materials or new device concepts that produce something fundamentally better? So, of course, and this is where perovskites come in. So very briefly, perovskite, as most of you all know, perovskite is a mineral calcium titanate, and it has been around for a long, long time. But the materials that have been useful for photovoltaics are lead or tin halide perovskites with this ABX3 crystal structure. And they were actually first discovered quite a while ago in 1892. But it wasn't until 2009 that they were first introduced into solar cells. And this was from the group of Tom Miyasaka and Towan University. So I saw this research and thought it was quite interesting, and had fortuitously had a UK-Japanese collaborative project with a colleague of mine, Takuru Murakami, who worked in Towan University in an adjacent lab to Tom Miyasaka. So I sent a PhD student out, Mike Lee, to try and learn how to make these perovskite materials. Unfortunately, by the time we arranged the trip to Japan, the postdoc who was working in Tom Miyasaka's lab had left, but we managed to get some notes off him, and this was our starting point, some chemistry written down to tell us how to make the materials and how to start. So before I carry on with talking about perovskites per se, I just want to sort of set the scene of what was going on in the research fields at the time. In the PV, we really had two disparate communities, with what I would call the traditional PV community, which has been people working on silicon, thin films, 3-5 semiconductors. There's a whole range of research goes on there, and that's really been the mainstay of the photovoltaics research in Europe for a long time, and it's obviously led to this commercialization of silicon, industrialization over the last number of decades. These devices worked on, you could collectively say there was a principle that you have a good quality solid absorber material, you generate free carriers in that material, and you extract it at contacts that are selective. And they're either selective through using a heterojunction of dissimilar materials or through selective doping, P and N doping with, for instance, boron and phosphorus and silicon. On the other side of the fence, there was the emerging PV communities. These were working on materials like organic semiconductors, dyes, nanostructured materials, and quantum dots. And the general premise was that things would be cheap, inexpensive, printable. There was a dream of flexible, lightweight photovoltaics. And the working principle of these materials was that the semiconductor itself isn't suitably high quality to transport free carriers a long range over the sort of depths or thicknesses you need to absorb sunlight, but they are made of interpenetrating networks of P and N-type materials or electron and hole conducting materials. And in the case of a dye-sensitized solar cell, the light absorber was sandwiched at this nanoscopic junction. So very different device concepts and really two different camps or fields. Now, we started looking at perovskites from the point of view of emerging PV, but very quickly came to realize that these materials might not necessitate the high surface area or porous structure that the emerging PV materials did. So the question arose was, are we better with a solid crystalline material and trying to make a device more like a thin film solar cell, or do we need this bulk heterojunction? And there was quite a lot of to and throwing, but our work quickly led us to realize that we could actually get away with just a solid polycrystalline layer of a few hundred nanometers to a micron in thickness, sandwiched between an N-type charge extraction layer and a P-type charge extraction layer. And in fact, now this device looks very similar to a thin film solar cell, and in fact got the interest of the traditional PV communities. And this is one of the reasons, I think, why our research within these previous disparate fields has come together, and there's a lot of benefit between sharing of ideas and concepts. So how does a perovskite solar cell work? Well, it's actually very simple. It's a simple double heterojunction. We have a conduction band and a valence band. We shine light on the material. We get the splitting of the quasi-Fermi levels. And in an ideal world, we have an electron extractor that will equilibrate with this quasi-Fermi level here and reflect holes, and a hole extractor which will form a good contact this quasi-Fermi levels for holes. Now, this structure is actually analogous to the so-called Werfel cell. And I should say that Peter Werfel won the Becquerel Prize in 2018 for his work on these sort of concepts and understanding efficiency in photovoltaics. So this is, in principle, the ideal type of structure for a photovoltaic device. And this is the sort of structure that we're pushing forward with perovskite solar cells. So as Pierre mentioned, and actually I forgot to say Pierre, but thank you very much for a wonderful introduction. I was thankfully saved all the embarrassing pictures. I didn't hack into your computer and stop it working, but I was relatively pleased that you could just ad lib. Anyway, the efficiency of the solar cells has increased tremendously, and even on our first publication, we reported 10.9% efficiency. This was right at the top of where the emerging PV technologies were at, and very rapidly the perovskite cells are approaching that of crystalline silicon. And in fact, there's nothing stopping them attaining the sort of efficiencies we see from gallium arsenide, even in single junction cells. But the question is, something new with only less than a decade of actual academic research and R&D, how can that compete with a technology that's got multiple decades of industrialization experience? And the answer is you'd never come off the shelf with a cost competitive system if you're trying to just compete like to like, however simply you think your material should be processed. So that's where we need to look at how we can do something that improves upon or that is something that silicon can't do. And that comes down to the tandem concept or multi-junction cell concept. So you saw a nice talk earlier this morning, if you were in the audience there, of tandem solar cells and perovskite on silicon, which is what I'm going to talk about. But very briefly, the main idea for anyone who wasn't watching that or isn't aware is that the solar spectrum comes in a range of colors, and these colors carry different energies, going from about 3.5, 4 electron volts right in the UV part of the spectrum down to around 2 electron volts in the red, and then dropping down further into the infrared. All this extra energy or voltage is lost if you absorb it in a single junction solar cell. It's lost as heat, thermalization. So the blue photons at 3 eV, if you collect them in a 1 eV gap solar cell, you're throwing away 2/3 of the energy straight away. So if you can slice this spectrum up, capture it in different solar absorbers with different bands of absorption or different band gaps, then you can stack them on top of each other and extract a lot more power from the solar energy. So that's precisely what we do with perovskites. We put perovskite on silicon, and here We, at the moment, the best recorded cells are at over 29% efficiency, which is already pretty outstanding. But actually, in the near future, we estimate that we should be able to push this up to between 32 to 34% without doing anything fundamentally different, just more optimization, solving problems we know we have. So beyond tandem cells, where do we go? What can we do? There's a whole range of different concepts. We're not massively creative, so I think we'll just go for 3 junctions first. But this is already looking quite promising. This is an example of an all-solution process 3-junction, all-perovskite cell we made in Oxford. And this is another example from CSEM EPFL of a tandem perovskite cell on top of silicon, so 3 junctions in total. And these devices could feasibly deliver up to 37 to 39% efficiency. So this is a roadmap to take this sort of technology up towards 40% efficiency before we have to start to make some more fundamental changes to how we do stuff. So in the last few minutes, I just want to show you a few slides discussing the commercialization and those aspects. So there's been a lot of effort on academic papers. There's possibly 10,000 papers a year, or certainly over 5,000 academic papers a year published now in this area. So it really is a dynamic field of research. But alongside that, there's been a whole host of IP and more commercial activity going on. This just illustrates, this is from 2018. We estimate that the actual number of patents has probably trebled now by about 2020. But there's a lot of activity. And thankfully, we're doing quite well from Oxford. This is a combination of Oxford PV and Oxford University filings, but there's a lot of competition there. In terms of our commercialization efforts, I'll say a few words about Oxford Photovoltaics. So I started this company in sort of start of 2011. And originally, we were trying to have a relatively capital light approach and develop a technology that we could then license to manufacturers. But we soon realized that the best way to market, or the most assured way to market, is actually try to scale up to manufacturing ourselves. And we got some strategic investors, including investment from Meyerberger, the Swiss-based equipment manufacturer who makes the silicon heterojunction lines, amongst other technologies. And now we're pushing towards large volume manufacturing. So this is a sort of summary of some of our development work we've had going on. In north of Oxford, we have a facility where we do the R&D. We take the stuff that's coming out of the university labs, and we're receptive to things published in the scientific literature, and we try to integrate it into devices that are manufacturable or will be manufacturable, and trying to push the efficiency and, importantly, the stability as well. The sort of stability tests we do are sort of IEC damp heat tests, thousands of hours light soaking, thermal cycling, and basically most of the IEC terrestrial PV reliability tests. Then we have a facility in Brandenburg. I'll say a few words more on, where we're making 6-inch full-scale wafers, and there we're translating the activity from Yarnton towards pilot production and now on towards production, where our target is to get to very high efficiency manufacturable cells with the required reliability. And on a note on reliability, we don't think there's any hiding from this, and we really are targeting matching silicon. So this is the 25 years plus reliability is what we believe we need, and it's what we're working towards to ensure this technology has got a marketplace. So we bought a facility in Germany, in Brandenburg. It was previously run by Bosch as a CIGS pilot or small-scale production line. They were closing down, so we bought it off them at the end of 2018, I believe. And then we've been ramping up. We've been going towards pilot manufacturing, and now we're pushing towards volume manufacturing. So we are installing the equipment for a greater than 100 megawatt production line. And the intention is, these are perovskite on silicon tandem M4 wafers. This is a module, and the intention and the roadmap is to have cells being modularized coming off the production line mid-2021. So this is in the near term, and of course we've started on-sun testing, and all the pre-qualification tests of these modules are to come. And just as the line, it will not be manual. This is for the photos purposes. So with that, I would like to thank my research group and lots of collaborators. So I have published a lot of papers over the last 10 years, and I just counted up. There's actually 250 different research collaborators that I've published with. So thank you all. Probably a lot of you are listening, and also people who I've got more extensive collaborations with, and a number of EU projects that I've been involved in or coordinated have all massively contributed towards this position of strength with this technology and the ability to hopefully, if you watch this space over the next year or two, actually produce real product from what's been originally a scientific curiosity. And finally, last and absolutely not least, all the funding bodies who've supported this research. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Henry, very much for this great talk. And congratulations again for the prize. And we are happy to have you in our group of prize winners of the Becquerel Prize. So thank you again. And this closes the ceremony. And I hand now over to Heinz Ossenbrink, who will guide us through the opening for the next contributions. Heinz, the floor is yours. And Henry, thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And it's also my turn to congratulate Henry and also saying hello to Joachim. Hope to see you all next year in real time. So my name is Heinz Ossenbrink. I used to work with the European Commission, but since a while I'm trying to help in this conference. And today I'm sitting in Munich and at the organizer's office, and I will try to help you a little bit in finding your way through this online conference. Now we will have a short break. You can imagine that we are kind of changing our chairs on the podium, but it's a little bit to assemble now the next speakers in the backstage. So we will have 2 or 3 minutes break, and I would like to ask you to come back in about 2 or 3 minutes. We will have now the opening addresses by our chairwoman, Nicola Pisa, and followed by a keynote lecture on virtual power plants for the transition to 100% renewables. So there will be quite an interesting program ahead, and later we will get into the panel debate. So I will now give the floor to a kind of slideshow, which is, I think, in the background, and we'll be back soon in a couple of minutes for the opening addresses.